Okay, hello. My name is Jake Shim, and I am a global studies major, and I'm currently in my second year. I was fortunate enough to be this year's FYRE Award recipient, and I got to do research on North Korea under Professor Tuong's guidance over the summer. And my research includes many different facets from investigating the general history of Korea and the earlier state development to an analysis that is specifically geared towards understanding the North Korean domestic propaganda on how the Kim regime goes about painting a picture of themselves to the international community and how they want the world to understand them, as well as exploring in depth some of the pressing human rights issues in North Korea that really prompts many of the residents to defect to places like South Korea. What motivated me to conduct research on North Korea was that I am Korean myself, and I've been always curious to try to understand what North Korea as a place is like, and I thought it was only fitting for me to go back and kind of revisit and learn more about the history of the people and the country I grew up in. And also, I realized apart from being able to understand the language fully, I knew I had greater access to information and resources and contacts, in my home country, as virtually all my family members living in South Korea, that I would be able to use them as my resource to try to understand the local culture, the language and the social norms of North Korea. Um, I grew up being taught to understand North Koreans rather than hate them. And doing research and learning more about the conflicts and the tensions really helped me make sense of the education I received back when I used to live in South Korea and what it really meant for me to be learning deeply about North Korea as a South Korean citizen, which obviously is a place that is really close geographically, but also very far in terms of the ideological and sociopolitical differences. So some of the methods I utilized during this process, I practiced both qualitative and quantitative empirical methods. Quantitative came in forms of defending my arguments through charts and graphs, such as explaining how much of an impact famine had or any other humanitarian issues had on its residents, and issues such as describing how much socialist aid the country has received from countries like China and Russia. Um, and some of the qualitative empirical methods, I made use of primarily testimonial evidence from former defectors, some experts on the study of North Korean affairs, and other scholars in the field. Um, so now I'm going to talk more about the highlights and the findings of my research. So some historical background about North Korea. Before Korea first proclaimed its independence from China under Japanese sponsorship, the Koreans were educated from the Chinese to really subscribe to a Confucian worldview and really depended heavily on the Chinese tradition. And so much of the influence came from China in the early years. Then Japan annexed the Korean Peninsula from China, and they often did that through a brutal show of force that made people to comply to their demand, like forcing Koreans to speak the Japanese language, taking Japanese names, and making them engage in Japanese religion. And this is generally known as more of a heavy and solemn period in Korean history. And delving deeper into earlier statehood of specifically North Korea, so the Soviet military rule became instrumental in the early development of the Northern regime, as well as for the creation of the many military and state security forces. Um, because at that time, the government subsidies and other incentives that were being provided by the Soviet Union, China, and other third world communist countries, they were the most important markets for North Korea. And since they were major suppliers of oil and other basic necessities, they were really important actors in North Korea trying to establish themselves as a third world nation at that time. But over time, as Kim Il-sung took over complete control of power from the Russian forces, he led a more independent foreign policy and this economic self-reliance from other countries. And this is referred to as Juche thought or self-reliance ideology. And this shift resulted in a gradual reduction of dependence on external support and a more assertive stance in international relations, which ultimately shaped North Korea's kind of unique trajectory as a self-contained and highly centralized state. In addition, much of the Kim Il-sung's presidency placed a lot of emphasis on the purity of the Korean bloodline, which showcased this embodiment of ethnic virtue and racial purity of the Korean race. And this cultural value of purity that Kim Il-sung was really pushing for really became the moral narrative of the personality cult and was exploited by the regime to cultivate a sense of obedience and loyalty to the leaders by its citizens. So this ideology and mindset that the personality cult is built upon really served as a key propaganda tool for them to disseminate the government's views, ideas, and opinions to the public. So portraying Kim as this heroic leader kind of reinforces his role as protector of the nation. And this portrayal is consistently emphasized in the regime's propaganda, even today. Another important thing to note is that North Korea at the cultural level is a collectivist society, and therefore the propaganda is fundamentally built upon this collectivist mindset. So every depiction that they make of people and the leader is dealt within this framework. So for example, propaganda often highlights stories of individuals or groups, kind of sacrificing their personal interests for the greater good of the state. And this emphasizes the importance of collective sacrifice and service to the nation. Also, it frequently emphasizes the importance of national unity and this idea of patriotism by portraying the nation as under constant threat from external enemies and forces like the United States, which highlights the need for a collective defense in their part. It also promotes the leader's image as this very admirable figure who is working tirelessly for the people and for the benefit of the collective. So in a way, the propaganda reinforces the idea that individual interests must be subordinated to the collective goals of the nation, which as a result fosters a deeply ingrained collectivist culture in North Korean society. So another key finding that I want to highlight is that what is being portrayed in the media strictly contrasts with the forms of struggle citizens often go through in real life. So to elucidate this matter further, in my project, I decided to focus on two specific issues that are most pervasive and severe to many North Korean people's lives today, in proving that there is a lack of credibility in propaganda when it comes to depicting the genuine human experiences and oppressive challenges that is faced by its citizens. So the most important and pervasive issue that I highlighted in my project is political repression. And political repression in North Korea is a central aspect of the regime's survival strategy because it enforces this strict ideological conformity to the people and instills this fear among citizens by dividing them into a different kind of political categories or hierarchies. These classifications are known as the core, the wavering, and the hostile. And basically the core refers to people who are the most loyal supporters of the regime, and the hostile class refers to people who are deemed to be threats to the regime. So this issue of political repression is very much intertwined with the issue of human rights abuses, because those in the hostile class often have to go through a lot of difficulties, a lot more difficulties and hardships than other classes that they may not go through, such as being the first to get their food rations cut by the government, or living under a heightened sense of surveillance from the government officials. And, their financial constraints means that it is less likely for them to secure their release from places like political camps and detention centers through bribery. They also have minimal to almost no access to medical facilities, and in general are put at a much higher rate than the rest of the population to be detained, jailed, or receive harsh punishments. So ultimately, these circumstances really force people in the hostile class, especially, to stay within the country, even when they want to seek escape. So yeah, so this is one of the many issues that the propaganda omits to talk about, which really adds a valuable layer that helps analyze the false narratives that is kind of being represented in domestic propaganda. All right, so to conclude, I would like to thank Kevin Hatfield, Landry McCormick, and JC Berg for enabling me to pursue this incredible opportunity over the summer. It really has been an invaluable experience for me being involved in research in my freshman year. And this will serve me well for sure in all the future research-related endeavors I may decide to partake in during my time here at the UO. With that, I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation on my project, The Bonafide Mindset of North Korean Propaganda. Thank you very much.